All right, so in this video, I'm going to be going over, so this template here is a Excel bookkeeping template that I created. And most of you probably are coming from my other video that I'm going to make where I'm going to go over how to use this template and how to do bookkeeping using Excel for your small business. But I wanted to create this supplemental video and going over from scratch using an Excel file from scratch of how to create this template. I think that, because I'm not a huge fan of kind of plug and play solutions. So I think if you agree with that as well, you probably want to have a deeper understanding of what this template actually entails, like how to actually create it in order for you to be able to customize in the future or troubleshoot it if some things aren't. Because that's what I feel like a lot of the potential is for a lot of these Excel templates is that if you like delete something or anywhere it can break the chain of all the formulas that are just put in there. And then if you don't know the actual ins and outs of the template itself, then you'll have nowhere to even begin to try to fix it. So I want to try to eliminate that issue by going over from scratch how to create this template. Or maybe you just don't want to sign up for my email newsletter, because that's what I'm asking for people. So I am offering this template to just send to you, but for you to download on your own, but I am asking in return to sign up for my email newsletter. So also too, if you just want to not do that, then maybe you can just watch this video, just create the template yourself. I'm not going to go over in too much detail in this video because I'm going to make another video of actually how to use this, but just, a brief summary. So you're not going to have any of this stuff here, but we're going to create this chart of accounts table here. And then we're going to have the different registers for the different bank credit card accounts you might have, where you can choose the category with the drop down from your chart of accounts. And I created this template very intentionally in order to be able to do reconciliations. I think that is, in my opinion, the number one way to check the accuracy of your bookkeeping for your profit and loss and everything. Because we're not going to be tracking a balance sheet or anything with this in Excel. However, I do believe that unlocking the ability to complete reconciliations is going to be a huge improvement in your bookkeeping, even using Excel. And with using this template that I created here, it's going to allow us to complete these reconciliations actually. So what we're going to be doing is, so I created this checklist here because I haven't memorized it myself how to create this template. So I made a checklist that I'm even going to be going through in this video. We're just going to go through it together. But I am going to put the link to view this template or this checklist in the description of this video. So if you want, go open up this exact checklist right here. And then I can't allow editing for everybody. So you may have to copy and paste it and maybe add the check boxes, which I believe is right here. So you might have to copy and paste and then add all the check boxes here so you can go through and also check everything yourself. So that's an option if you want. But having said all that, let's begin creating this template. So the first step I have here is open a new Excel file and then save as and create a file name, including the year. And the reason I say this is because I would recommend, if you're doing this, to create a separate bookkeeping spreadsheet in Excel for each year. I wouldn't recommend stringing years together in this particular workflow. So what I put here is I already did that. I created a new file here, just as a blank Excel file, and then I saved as LLC Bookkeeping 2024. So do something along those lines, name it whatever you want, probably including the year as well is a good step. Now that's created, we're going to just add a bunch of new sheets down here. The minimum, I believe, is going to be 5, but you may need to add more. So if you just have, and this will depend on how many registers we need. So if you want to have a separate register for every account where business account where money's coming in and out. So if you just have one business checking account, then opening 6 sheets would work. If you also have a credit card, open 7 sheets. If you also have a savings account and a credit card, open 8 sheets. You get the point. So open as many sheets here as you need. What we're going to do now is we're just going to name these sheets as we go. So sheet 1 here, we're going to name that chart of accounts. So you can just click on the sheet, double click, and then hit rename. And then now we're going to add the first register sheet here, and this is going to be for the bank account. So we're going to name that bank register. Now here at this stage, if you have any credit card or savings accounts, then you would rename those as well on the next sheets here. But the next one here, we're going to make a cash and owner's investment register. And I'll explain why, and if you watch my video coming up of why this is important to have this here and mandatory also. Even if you're not tracking or having on hand business cash, I would still recommend having this register here. And this will even count for things if you purchase something using personal funds that you want an expenses business account. This will be the register to add it in, because you don't want to add that to your bank register. And then we have the profit and loss reports in the next sheet. With this template, I'm going to do a full year's by month profit and loss. I know some templates, they do each month as a separate sheet, and that's, if you want to do that, you certainly can. I personally like having it all in 1 year, just month to month, because that gives you a really good visual to see your month's income and expenses and everything, and your net income, all in the same sheet. And then if you want, you can also create charts and things using Excel, all in that same sheet. So that's what we're going to do in this case, is we're just going to have one profit and loss sheet here, and it's going to be month to month. Now this next sheet, we're just going to rename it worksheet. And then finally, in the last sheet, we're going to name it month-end checklist. We're going to create a checklist for ourselves. All right, now that we have all the sheets named for now, and of course, as you go, you can always add more or move them around wherever you need to do. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to create the chart of accounts now. So we're going to go into this sheet here. And this is going to be, so this is the accounts you can choose from whenever you're categorizing your transactions, is basically what this is. So we're just going to choose anywhere in the top left here. We're going to put in the top of one column, we're going to put account. And then the next column over, we're going to put report category, something like that. And now we're going to add in, so we're going to add in now the report categories, and it goes ale and ice is the way to remember it. So just think of like ice in your beer, but so you have the ale, which is the balance sheet account categories, which is assets, liabilities, and equity. And then you have the ice, or the income statement accounts, the profit and loss accounts, which is income, cost of goods sold, and expenses. And we're going to do it in that order, ale then ice. And there's going to be a few accounts we'll go over here. So even though that I'm going to say are mandatory in this template, in this workflow, and what I mean by that are balance sheet accounts that we're going to include in here. So again, we're not going to be actually tracking a balance sheet report in Excel, because I don't recommend doing that in Excel. But in order for this to work, and more specifically, in order for you to be able to do the reconciliations, we're going to need a few balance sheet accounts in here. But all we're going to do in this stage, so what I like to do, so first we have assets. So under report category, I put assets, and then just click right here and drag down. Let's say like 5 of them for now. But what I'm going to do when I'm doing this is create a bunch of extras. So we'll go back to the created one too. So even though in this particular case we have 3 assets, I have 5 listed out here. And the reason I like doing that is that you always have the option to just add in a new asset as you go, and it makes it a lot easier than trying to, because you'll see we're going to be pulling information from this table. So rather than like adding a row and then redoing all that and everything, you have space here in order to add new accounts in the future if you need to. So that's why we're going to do that, because it doesn't matter how big this table is. You can have a bunch of blanks here. So we're just going to pull this down to give us a bunch of asset account potentials. And then we're going to do liabilities next. Again, we're just going to drag it down, and then we have equity. We're going to drag that down as well. You probably don't need a huge amount of things like equity, assets, liabilities, but so we'll do like 5 to 10 for each one of these. That might even be overkill. But next, so we have income. So we'll do a few of these. Then we have cost of goods sold. And then we have the expenses. And the expenses are probably going to be the category we're going to have the most amount of accounts in, so we'll put a bunch of those. And this might be overkill, but again, this just allows us to have a bunch of space, because you're not going to be looking at this all the time. This is going to be something to pull from whenever you're categorizing things in your register and everything. So here, I just have in the checklist to do what we just did, to enter in all the categories and then drag them down. So now we're going to start actually creating our chart of accounts, and that means putting things under the account thing here. So you can widen this column here. And the way that I like to do it is put in the account name, and this will make sense later on when we're using the workflow. But I like to, in this particular case, I'd like to put in the account name, then put a dash, and then put like the report category next to it. And the reason for that is because later on, so let's say for example, so here we have like bank account asset, credit card liability, owner's investment equity. See here, this is the created template already. And the reason I like that is because whenever we're actually categorizing these, it shows up here for our reference to see. I wouldn't want it to just have bank account, credit card, owner's investment, sales, returns. I wouldn't like it to have just the account name without it also referencing the actual categories. It's going to be important for you to know what you're actually categorizing it as. So that's why I like at this stage to create the actual accounts like this. And I'm not going to go over in too much detail of these actual chart of accounts. I have a course on that, but you can also Google some things in terms of, especially once we get down to the expenses, but I'll go over a few here, and I also go over a few that are mandatory in this particular workflow. So first we have the bank account. That's going to be an asset. And most of you probably or should have a business bank account before we use this. If you have any sort of cash on hand, you put that as well as an asset. If you have a savings account, things like that, those are going to be assets. If you have a fixed asset, you can put that in there as well. Now, liabilities, probably the most common one right now for you would be any sort of credit card. So you could put credit card liability, and you could put the credit card company name, the last four of the card, whatever you want to do here. I think that's the only thing we're going to put here in this case is in the liability is just going to be credit card. And then down here in equity, there's there's two that I'm going to call mandatory in this workflow. And again, this will allow us to reconcile because the reason for this is we want to categorize every in and out transaction in, let's just say, our business bank account in order to reconcile it. And some of those transactions are going to be equity accounts that aren't actually going to show up in your profit and loss. So if you deposit from your personal funds into your business bank account, that's going to be an owner investment. Or if you sometimes what will happen is that you'll purchase something out of your business bank account, but it'll actually be a personal expense. We still want to be able to categorize those as something in order to reconcile that bank account, but we don't want to include anything in our profit and loss. And we also just don't want to delete it or not put it in our register at all, because then we won't be able to reconcile. But anyway, so because of that, we're going to put in an owner's investment equity account, and then we're going to have an owner's pay and personal expenses. This also too will track if you're paying yourself out of your business bank account and you're not earning payroll yet, which you're most likely not. If you're going to be able to use Excel, you're most likely not doing payroll. But this is where you can categorize if you're paying yourself out of your business bank account is this equity account. Because again, we're not going to be putting that on our profit and loss right now because it's not a business expense until you start doing payroll. So moving down here, you have income. Right now, we're just going to do, so the two that I would say are mandatory at this point, I would say is sales and returns. And then of course you can customize this as much as you want. You can break down different sales income accounts, however you want it to look on your profit and loss, you can do that here. But the reason I say at the least the mandatory is sales and returns is because if you look at your tax form, which is most likely a Schedule C, which we can look at that now, we see in the top income section here, we have gross sales and then we have returns. So that's why I'd say I would at least put those two down for just tax compliance reasons. This is also, we'll get to expenses in a second. But next we have cost of goods sold. I would put at least one of these, even if if you are tracking inventory cost of goods sold, like FIFO and things, I wouldn't recommend Excel in the first place, but still, I would still put at least one here because there's any sort of kind of cost of service, even if you're not selling like inventory, for example, you still may be able to do, put some things in cost of goods sold. It's essentially things that are directly related to an increase and decrease in sales in terms of the costs associated with that. So I'd put at least one of those. So now moving down here, we have expenses, and I'm actually going to create some more of these. This is going to be customized to you in your business. There's a few good starting places that I would go to. The number one being your Schedule C, your tax form, because then you'll know exactly what the categories are going to be whenever you're doing tax compliance at the end of the year. So I would start here to get some ideas. You can Google your industry, chart of account examples, things like that, just to get some more ideas. I have a few listed out here that and this is gonna be, I don't think I had these in the template, in the checklist, I mean. But you can look here. I'm just gonna copy and paste these for now from the already created template. But this is just kind of a general kind of bulk expense business account examples here, and I'm gonna take off the coloring and everything. So what I did here is I put advertising, marketing expense, auto expense, again, just putting that category next to it. But again, this is going to be customized to you. But what I have here just in this example is I have advertising and marketing expense, auto expense, bank charges expense, charitable contributions, dues and subscriptions, insurance, interest, legal and professional, meals, office, rent, repairs and maintenance, shipping, subcontractors, supplies, taxes paid, travel expense, travel meals expense. You should break these out, utilities, and other expense. And that reminds me, I probably want to put also here an other income account. So this right here, if you just want to kind of maybe pause the video and write all these out, this is a good starting point, I think. But again, it's customized to you. It may include more than you need. It may not include enough, but that's a good probably starting point for you. So here I'm just checking off. We just put in the assets, put in the liabilities, put in the equity. And in the checklist, I do have some examples here of like the owner's pay, owner's investment, things like that, and the equity. So we got the sales, cost of goods sold, and the expenses. So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a table. It just helps keep things cleaner. Oh, also too, so here, how you see how we have expenses and we have a lot more extra that aren't filled in. Keep those in here like this. And again, this is just going to allow us to easily add in other expenses as we go, rather than trying to add rows and redo formulas and things. So make sure to keep, for all the categories, make sure to have blank ones available in here. So we're going to create a table, highlighting everything, all the way down to the bottom ones here that are blank. So then we're going to go in the top here, we're going to do insert, and then table. That's what's going to make it a table. And then I like checking this. My table has headers because we have this account report category here. So we can check that box. So now we have it as a table, and then you can make it, whatever color you want. And this looks weird because we copy and pasted it, but just kind of forget that for now. But make it whatever color you want. But here we have a table. So now we have our chart of accounts created. That sheet is done. And what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the register pages here. So you have the bank register, cash and owner's investment register. You may have, again, a savings credit card, but we're going to create the template layout for these register pages. In order to do that, we're going to go in the top row here, and then we're just going to start in each cell for each column. We're going to just start putting in some headers. And so we're going to put in date, and then we have bank description. And this, I'm not going to go over in this video of why we're doing this, but this will make sense, obviously, if you watch the other video where I actually go through using this template. But for now, I'm just going to go over, what we're actually entering here. So we have vendor/customer name, category, deposits. So now we have all the headings here listed out, again, per column. And you can do whatever you want here. Like you can highlight all these and bold them if you want. It's up to you. Make them centered, whatever you want to do. But what we are going to do is we're going to make it so that we're going to freeze the top row, it's called. So if you go to view here in the top, and then you'll see this freeze top row button here. So we're going to click on that. And essentially what that does is as you scroll down, it keeps the heading. So if we're filling in this register and you start adding them down here, you won't have to keep scrolling up to the top in order to see what category it's in. So we're going to go ahead and freeze that top row in order to allow us to do that. We can widen this a little bit. And so at this stage, if you have I'll just give you a quick example. So if you have a credit card, for example, in the next sheet, then what you would do is copy and paste what we just did in the top row into that credit card register page. Again, widen the rows. Again, view, freeze top row, and then you can just change little things to make it make more sense. So again, we're saying this is a credit card register. So you can put, rather than bank description, you just change that to credit card description. Bank register balance, you can just put credit card register balance. Credit card statement, things like that, in order to make it. So this would be an example of a credit card register. We have it right next to the bank one here. And then now we have the cash and owner's investment register here. And we're going to enter in these titles here. So we have date, vendor name, category. You can put, I have it in this checklist here to put cash/owner investment payment amount. You can also just put amount. And then we have this here. So we have cash balance, and I have in parentheses, only if you pulled from the ATM, from your business bank account. Would you, at that point, take a register balance of the actual cash balance? If not, you just leave this blank. So we're going to widen out some of these as well. You can bold them if you want. It's up to you. Highlight them, go to home, hit the B here to make them, make them centered if you want. Just click here. And then once again, we're going to go to view here, and then we're going to freeze that top row in order to make it like that. All right, so now that we have the headings for our 3 registers here, so we have our credit card register, our cash and owner's investment register, and our bank register. We're going to, at this point, we're going to give us the capability here in order to have a drop down in order to choose whenever we're categorizing these transactions. We're going to be able to drop down and choose from our chart of accounts table. So we're going to start with the bank register here. So we're going to click on the first cell here that's below the category title, not the actual category title, but the first cell below it. And then we just remember that it's an E because we're just going to scroll down a bunch in order to capture a bunch of rows. And then we're going to hold shift and then click again. And what that essentially did is just highlighted a bunch of this row here in order to highlight a bunch of those cells. And now in order for us to make this checkpoint is once these are all highlighted, we're going to go all the way to the top bar here. And then we're going to click on data and then validation. And then under this allow criteria here, we're going to click on allow, hit that button, and then hit list. And now in this source button here, we're going to click on this little box right here, and this will allow us to choose cells in order to be the source for this dropdown. So once we click that, we're going to go back into our sheet of our chart of accounts sheet here. So we're going to click on the chart of accounts table, and then under the account names here, again, not the account, but the first one under, we're going to highlight, scroll down, again, hold in shift in order to highlight them all. And we're going to highlight all these blank ones as well that are like for the expenses, for example. And this will be able for us to capture also in this drop down if we add new expenses later on. So that's important to go all the way to the bottom here. So we're going to click on that. Once you do that, you see this little box once again. Click on that to expand the screen again. And then we can just hit OK here. Or if you want, you can hit input message and put things like categorize from chart of accounts. You know, just an example, you can just put, I'm just going to put example, see what it looks like. If you want to make a little note to yourself here, you can do that. Let's just put like, here it could be like a good reminder. If a new category, add to chart of accounts table, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But either way, you can just hit OK here. And now you'll see what that did is under this category column here, is it gives us the ability to click on this. And now we're looking at our chart of accounts account, so we can just choose from. And here's where you have the title and then the little note to yourself here. And what I mean by this, if new category, add to chart of accounts, because what you don't want to do, let's say that you have a new, let's say that transaction that came in, that was a $100 withdrawal for Apple. And let's say you're categorizing it and you don't really have an expense account that you like and you want to create a new one. So what you wouldn't want to do is just put in, let's just say like computer expense, for example. You don't want to just add in computer expense here. And that's actually good. I never actually tried that. So it actually doesn't even allow you to do that, which is actually really cool. I just learned that just now. What you want to do is first go into your chart of accounts table, and where we have our blank spaces here in order to give us room to add in new expense accounts, here is where we would put computer expense. And again, because whenever we did the validation in order for the list to happen, and because we scrolled all the way down here and included all these blank cells, it'll automatically, when we go back, include that category that we just created, the computer expense right here. So that's how you would do that. That's why it's very specific as to how we're kind of doing this here. This portion right here is probably the most important part in terms of the template creation, in terms of making it more flexible for you rather than just trying to plug and play things. So we're just going to not copy and paste. We're just going to do that again for all the registers. So here we have the credit card register again. Click on the top cell under category, scroll down a bunch, hold in shift, click here, data in the top, validation, go to settings, list, click this box for source, chart of accounts, and we're just going to highlight all these. Again, if you have to, scroll down, hold in shift, and then hit OK. Then I'm going to do it one more time here for this category register for the cash and owner investment register. Let's go back to our drop down or our checklist here. So, all right, so we added the drop downs, which is really cool in Excel in order to be able to do this, in order to choose our categories here. But that's how that's handled. That's how I created that so if you have looking at the template that I used in the video, that's the same exact way that I created this ability, was what we just showed right here in our new Excel spreadsheet here. So now we're going to go over into our profit and loss report sheet, and we're going to start creating the template for our profit and loss reports. So we could first, just in this first column here, just widen out that row to give us some room. And then at the top, we're going to put item. This is just going to be a label. And then once we have item in the top row, have it widened out, then we're just going to go through in the rest of the top rows, and we're just going to put in the 3-letter abbreviation for each month. And then the last column here, we're going to put YTD, and that means year to date. So this way, whenever we're all done here, we're going to have profit and losses in each column for all the months for the year, and then in the last column, there's going to be a running total for the total year up to that point. Now what we're going to do, I like to keep it just kind of a simple layout. So the way I did it is I just I'll put like a main category title, and then underneath that we'll put and what I mean by main category title, in this case, we're only going to be talking about profit and loss report categories here, which again, that means income accounts, cost of goods sold accounts, and expense accounts. So we're going to put first the main title in order to have more of a box for the main categories. And then we're going to have a total. Then we're going to put in the actual chart of account accounts underneath that, leaving again a few blank cells for additions in the future. And then we're going to have a total for that category amount. And then that's just how I like to keep it kind of simple with that. So again, I'm just going to reference the created one here. Remember how I did it all. Okay, so we have income here. So you can just put that as this is just going to be the main category. We're not actually going to put any numbers in here. Put a couple blank spaces, and then here we can put the actual accounts. So what we're referencing here is our chart of accounts under income. So we have sales, returns, and other income. We want to include these accounts in our profit and loss. So you have sales, returns, other income. And now what we're going to do is leave a few blank spaces, again, for future additions, and then we're going to put, after that, we're going to put total income, because this will be a lot easier if we need to add another income account in the future to just add it here rather than trying to add rows and stuff, especially if we start getting formulas and stuff involved, then it just becomes a lot potentially more messier. So after total income, we're going to leave another blank cell, and then we're going to have a cost of goods sold category, leave a couple blank. I like leaving a lot of blanks in this, just leaving room for it to breathe for additions and everything. That's just personally like how I like to do it. But we're going to have that cost of goods sold account, whatever you put in your chart of accounts under cost of goods sold, you can put that in there as well. Again, a couple of spaces, and then we have total. I'm just going to put total COGS here, total cost of goods sold. Now I'll write it out. Now leave a couple blank spaces again. And then what you want to put here, so you have your income, and then you have your cost of goods sold, your total income, total cost of goods sold. Then what you want to put is gross profit. You want to have a separate line for that. What gross profit is income minus cost of goods sold. Leave a couple spaces again, and then we're going to put in expenses as the category kind of title here. Leave one blank space, and then here we're going to list out all of our expense accounts that we have in our chart of accounts. All right, so we have now all the expenses written out here. And then again, leave a bunch of blank spaces here, and then we're going to put total expenses. Then after that, we're going to put net income. So that's going to be the total net income. It's going to be income minus cost of goods sold minus expenses is going to be our net income. Now we can format it a little bit. This is going to be up to you, however you want it to look. What I ended up doing is first I just bolded and centered all the headings here. And then for the main category accounts, I bolded it and then made it a little bit bigger. So we have income, cost of goods sold, expenses. And then for the totals, I bolded them. I didn't make them bigger. So we have the total income. I made that bold. Total cost of goods sold, gross profit, total expenses, and net income. Then what I also did under all the totals is highlight all of them and then just make a bottom line. So if you highlight all the cells, click this down arrow, and then we have the bottom border here. That's what I did here, just to kind of clean it up a little bit. So we have a more of a breakdown between total income, total cost of goods sold, gross profit, total expenses, and then the net income. And of course too, this is optional, but another thing I did is I just highlighted all the cells again for the main categories, so like total income here, and I just changed the color a little bit. So if you highlight them all, then you have this background thing here. I just did like a light gray for these ones. You do whatever color you want. Again, we're just kind of breaking it down a little bit, or breaking it out, I should say, making it a little bit more organized looking. Same here. And then for the net income row, I made it a light green. But, make it however you want. That's the point of this video. But so here's the beginning of a good kind of a layout for a profit and loss here. We have, it's organized. We have some room to add things if we need to in the future and everything that's in our chart of accounts, that's income, cost of goods sold, and expenses is included. And so one thing to mention here is that if at any point you add an account to your income, cost of goods sold, or expenses on your chart of accounts, you also want to go in and add that as well to your profit and loss template. Add it anywhere down here. When we're creating these formulas here, we're going to include, as always, we're going to include all the blank ones as well. So if you add a new account, add in numbers, it'll automatically include those calculations in like the total expenses formula, for example. Now here we're going to add in a few formulas. I'm not a huge fan of adding already made formulas into Excel sheets because things just start to get sometimes just, again, once you kind of break that somewhere along the line, the chain of formulas, it just like kind of breaks everything down. I like doing things a little bit more manual. But there are a few formulas we can add here from the beginning that'll just make our lives easier as we go. So first we're going to start out with just doing all the total columns here and making a formula for those. So we have the total income here. So we're going to do equals the sum, and then we're going to highlight all the cells included above that, all the income cells, including, again, ones that don't have anything. So that in the future, if we add an income account, it'll be already included in the formula. So you won't have to mess with the formula again. So just hit enter there. And what I like to do is just drag that over to include it for all the months and for the year-to-date calculation. One quick note, and we'll go over this. This is more so of the actually how to use it thing. If you notice, what we did here is we just added the total income as the sum of all these. So because of that, if you have returns, how you want it to look on your profit and loss, let's say you have $1,000 in sales and $100 in returns, you want this to be shown up as negatives in the returns. If you put $1,000 in sales and $100 in returns, it'll show $1,100 income, which isn't right. So that's just a quick note there that you want to make sure in this workflow is why that's important there, to make this actually negative. Because, I mean, of course you can change the formula to subtract out the returns if you want to. Again, this is the point of this video. Again, if you want to do some customization here, but like things like this is where you want to fully understand actually what's going on. Next, we have the total cost of goods sold, same thing, equals the sum for all those cost of goods sold lines. Bring them across. Now the gross profit is total income minus cost of goods sold. That's the formula, that's the accounting formula that makes up gross profit. So that's how you'd come up with that number. Drag that across as well. Then we're going to go down here to total expenses, equals the sum. We're going to include all the blank ones all the way up to here. For, again, any future additions here, the formula will include it. Drag it over. And then we have the net income. So we have equals the sum. So net income, so all of it is total income minus cost of goods sold minus expenses. But because gross profit is income minus cost of goods sold, we're just going to do gross profit minus expenses. That's going to be the formula that we're going to do in order to come up with our net profit. And once again, we're going to drag that over. And what I like to do at this point for the year-to-date stuff is for this particular example, or in this case, for the lines that have already accounts in them, then we're going to do equals the sum, and then we're going to drag it from January over to December. So we made that formula there, equals the sum of all these. And what I'm going to do, and this is for sales, I'm going to drag it down 3 more for returns and other income. In this case, I don't like dragging it all the way down because you just have a bunch of zeros and it makes it not clean. You'll just have to know if you do that if you do at some point add a new income account, then you'll want to just do that again, or you can just drag it down once again in order to include that same formula. But I don't like, in this case, I don't like doing it like this, because then all these zeros are in here for no reason and just makes it a little bit sloppier than it needs to be. So once again, we have the cost of goods sold here. So we're going to do equals the sum of all the prior months. Expenses, so we're going to start on row 22 here, because that's the first one. For the advertising, equals the sum of all those months. And then we're going to bring it down to row 39 here. And the reason I did that is so as you go for the different expense accounts here, you'll see that it's going to keep a running register and a running number for the year to date for all those expense accounts here. And that's also going to be included in the total expenses and the net income. So it's a really cool system for all that. That's why we're going to, in this case, we're going to create these formulas already made in order for things like this to calculate correctly. Just know and remember the actual formulas and why you did them this way. So again, whenever you are moving along here, you have some room for flexibility and things like that. I'm just going through, I wasn't watching the checklist for this, but we just did a bunch of these tasks here. Again, this is also included if I'm going too fast in the video, this is all included in the checklist here of everything we just went over with creating the profit and loss. And then the last thing here for the profit and loss, I said put in some numbers in different spots for now, just to check your accuracy of make sure you did everything right. Make sure the cost of goods sold and the gross profit and income, expenses, net income is calculating correctly, and also including in the year to date, just to make sure that everything's working as it should be. So here I just have for the worksheet, that's just going to be blank in the template. It's needed for whenever we're working with it. Again, I'm going to go over that in the other video, but for now, the worksheet is just going to be left blank. So last one we have is just this month-end checklist. I like having this in there. So this is just notes to ourselves in order to keep things organized, in order to complete these month-end processes. So we're going to go ahead and click on that sheet to get started here. So the first thing, again, we're going to put item here just as a header, and we're going to widen this a lot because this is where we're going to be making notes to ourselves. So this is going to be the steps we're going to say we're going to be needing to complete on a month-end basis. And then we're going to do the same thing as the profit and loss. For these columns, we're just going to add in the 3-month or 3-letter month abbreviations. So next checklist here, I have to add in the actual steps here and just a few notes here. So I do have examples, and these are all written out in the checklist here. So we have, enter any cash expenses, update the cash balance. A lot of these won't make any sense until you fully go over the actual workflow itself in the other video. A lot of them are very specific and needed in this exact workflow in order to do reconciliations. Like compare the register balance with the statement balance of no difference and the account is reconciled, or, things like that. So this is a lot of these are very specific to this exact workflow. So a lot of these you might just want to copy and paste, watch the other video to get a full understanding of how to do that. But having said that, this is also, of course, very customizable and flexible for you and your business. So as you go, you're going to be adding most likely new items to this. You can drag the cells around, in terms of the change the order of what order because where you were going to get is to be able to go here and just check things off as you go in order for each month to track your month-end process. So this is a great starting point, what I have here in the checklist. These are in order that you would create them for the workflow. So I would probably just copy and paste these ones here first. And then as you go, you can move things around, add new things like that in order to just have a checklist here for your month-end process of your workflow. All right, so I copy and pasted these. We're going to make this even wider. And again, I didn't mention this, but again, if you just want to highlight the top row, make it bold, whatever you want to do. You can put the underline thing here if you want again, just whatever you want to do. But this will allow us to, as we go, for each month, check off the processes for each of these tasks that we're going to need to do in order to say that our month ends are complete. Again, at any point, you can add new ones, move them around if you need to. So if you highlight one, use the little mouse thing here where it has the hand. You can move the orders around if you want to. Just have some flexibility of creating this checklist here. Now what I'd like to do is leave some blank spaces here for future editions of the checklist. We're just going to put other workflow notes, bolded if you want. Here, I just like to add, so this would just be notes to yourself to remind yourself. So this is involving anything in regards to the bookkeeping workflow. I like having it here in the same spreadsheet to just keep things organized and make sure you don't forget anything, as the months go on. So here I just copy and paste some things that are once again in the checklist. I'm gonna link in the description here. But so things we have, like when putting a return, to make it, when you calculate it, make it a negative, because what it's gonna look like in your registers is you'll have a return and then it's gonna be under withdrawals. And when you're calculating things in your profit and loss, you're gonna be summing those. So it'd be like equals the sum of that return. So you want to make sure that you either go in and change it to negative 100, or you can make a formula where you make all these automatically like times -1 to change them to a negative, or you can change the formula in here where the total income is the sum of this minus the returns. There's a lot of flexibility here. And again, this is why I like creating this template video, because this will allow you to make those decisions and know exactly what's going on. But in this case, I have in the notes here that when you're calculating the returns on the profit and loss, to put them in as negatives. Things like every transaction in and out of the bank and credit card accounts will need to be categorized, things like that. But anyway, I'd put, notes like that in here for your reference. And a quick note, so there's going to be things that we go over in the actual workflow of how to do these things, specifically in the registers, to where I don't put in a formula in the template. And it's not in my template that I send out, and I wouldn't recommend it either at this stage to put it in your template. But there are going to be formulas that are going to be used in these kind of cases, but I recommend just doing it as you go, and then from there you can kind of drag down the formula. So like things, what I'm talking about is like calculating the bank register balance, having a formula for that in here, having the register versus statement difference. I don't like putting in the formula at this stage for those kind of things, but you are going to be creating formulas for that in the future. Now here I have the final two steps here, and the final two steps are both optional. First one is adding in any extra sheets that you need to track or you would like to track. You can create a new sheet, drag it over to the end here. And what I mean is like things like if you're tracking fixed assets, for example, because once again, we're not actually keeping this. So this would basically be for any sort of balance sheet kind of accounts that you want to track separately for your purposes. We're not going to be doing a balance sheet in Excel, and I don't recommend doing that. But if you want to track, if you have a few fixed assets and you want to track those, you can just create you might as well put it in the same bookkeeping spreadsheet to keep things organized. So you can just have, like the fixed asset name, the original cost, depreciation per year. I don't know. I'm just kind of making these up. Years in service, net value, things like that. But like just like a simple little spreadsheet like that, where you're just like tracking a few fixed assets, their current value, how much depreciation is taken on it. You can just add sheets like that in here. Things like invoice tracking, if you're sending out invoices, because again, we're not going to be doing a balance sheet. We're not going to be tracking actual accounts receivable. But if you want to have a sheet that you list out all your invoices, which ones are paid, which ones are still outstanding, things like that, you can add those sheets in here as well. So that's an optional step for that. And then finally, the last optional step, if you want, is to, once the template's created, then you can save it as a template. So under file here, you see save as template. So let's create this template as a separate template save in Excel. And the reason I like this is that if you're doing it for 1 year, and then if you just want to, like I mentioned, I recommend you start fresh in the new year. You can just create a new Excel file using this original template, and then starting from scratch, and then just like resave it as the new year name. So that's something you can do. You can also hard save it somewhere else, just to have many backups of this. And then just quickly on that note, I also recommend as you go every month end, probably hard saving it somewhere else as well in order to just create that backup. But having said all that, yeah, that's how I created the template. So from the beginning of the video, so we have the template here, which is what I'm sending out, what I'm using and teaching with how to do bookkeeping in Excel. This is the template that I'm going to use when I do the video of how to actually do the bookkeeping. And what we did is we started a scratch Excel file, and we created that same template. So we have the chart of accounts here. We have all the register things with our ability to choose the category. We have the profit and loss report all organized by month and year to date with all the different expense accounts. We have the month-end checklist and the workflow notes. Again, this is just a supplemental video, get a more in-depth deep dive into the actual template itself. So hopefully this will answer a lot of questions. Well, first, it'll hopefully allow you, if you want, to just create the template from scratch. But also too, what I hope this does is that if you're just using the template that I sent out, that if some issues came up for you, especially regarding things like the chart of accounts and the, choosing the category and the things like the profit and loss formulas and calculations, that hopefully having this more in-depth view can help you troubleshoot things or customize things for you for now and in the future.